Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to see everyone on this beautiful summer day. It's going to get kind of hot today. It's time of summer vacations. I thought about some summer riddles. These are kids' riddles about having to do with summer vacation. I thought they were kind of cute. Test your riddle skill. A lot of people go to baseball games in the summer. What animal is always at a baseball game? A bat. Good job. Good job, Barbara. A lot of people go to the ocean. How do we know that the ocean is friendly? It waves. Good job. All right. We're on a roll here. All right. Here's what do ghosts like to eat in the summer?
Blueberries.
I said ribs.
Nope. Ice cream. Ice cream.
Ice cream.
Yeah. Where do sheep like to go on summer vacation? Sheep. Where do they go on vacation? That's a good guess, though. Close. They like to go to the Bahamas. Bahamas. I like that one. And where do sharks go on vacation? Sharks. Finland. Finland. Okay. Pretty good on those. Pretty good on those. Well, welcome. Thanks for being here this morning. Thanks for those of you tuning in online. Glad to have you with us. I don't think we have any newcomers. I can tell at a quick glance around the room. So, and I always tell people we have masks available on the table at the back if you need one. So help yourself to that. And we're so delighted to have musical guests today, Avalon 9, Linda Blaine, and Dave Clutter. So let's welcome them. So glad to have them here today. So we're going to begin to think about going into an opening prayer together. Invite you to bring into your mind and heart all those you are lifting up in prayer this morning. Those of you tuning in online also, people anywhere, living beings across the globe, whoever we are lifting up in prayer, let's bring them into our hearts and into our minds this morning. And Dave and Linda are going to do a beautiful going into prayer song called Open Wide My Heart. Ourselves to become centered and still, aware of an opening within us, opening of our hearts, of our minds, to that power and presence that we are deeply connected to, that life of God within us, that energy of God that is flowing through us always, healing us in body, mind, and spirit. Wounds we may not even be aware of. The powerful energy of God is healing right now, renewing us, filling us with new strength, new hope, new energy, and a steadying peace to see us through any challenge we might face. We affirm our awareness this morning that this power and presence is within each one of us, everyone in our community, with living beings everywhere. deep within, we are connected to this unfailing love, this wellspring of healing life, this great wisdom, and this unshakable peace. We affirm this truth for everyone we're lifting up in prayer this morning, for everyone in our community of prayer. Whatever healing is needed is underway. We are being at all times restored to perfect wholeness, guided in the path of health and life and well-being. God is with us always, now, eternally, guiding and protecting us, keeping us true to ourselves and in touch with the great life of God within. So we come out of this time of prayer together with grateful hearts and minds, knowing we are never alone, we are always one with the living God, and all is well. And so it is. Amen. All right, Linda and Dave are going to do a song for us. I think it's called Keeping the Faith, right?
That's the refrain, so sing along.
All right. Carpenter, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Keeping the faith. Thank you so much, Linda, Dave. Yeah. Well, I'm kind of I was entranced with a phrase that's been in my head all week from an interview I read with a poet named Naomi Shihab Nye. I don't know whether any of you are familiar with her. As an old English major, I guess, I sort of was really taken with some of the things she had to say about poetry, but also about life. It's kind of a way of living with a greater richness and enjoyment and depth, living spaciously. That's kind of what I took as my title, because she kind of prompted this idea for me today. She says she does a lot of creative writing. She's a professor at, I think it's Texas State University, a creative writing professor, and she does a lot of visiting, teaching, creative writing workshops and things around the country. She says everywhere she goes, now she writes on the board, if there is a board, "You are living in a poem." You are living in a poem, and that's the phrase that's been in my head all week. What that means, how that's happening to me in the moment, how I'm living in a poem right now, how you are living in a poem. And she means it in a really kind of quite literally, that the way we live can really be very much like a poem, the way a poem works. If you're living sort of attentively and mindfully and really taking in, paying attention to where you are, that it's about savoring images. There's an image that comes to you and you savor that, and maybe that connects with another image, and maybe there's a little reflection that goes with those images that takes you back, maybe a memory, maybe an idea that springs as a result of these things coming together. So kind of by the end of a poem, often you've kind of had some revelations, some new ideas rising in your mind. That's kind of like how we live. We take note of images on a beautiful day like this, and they kind of drift in our minds, and they connect up with other images, maybe images from our childhood or our background, or something we saw on the internet, and then we kind of connect those up with some kind of text, some kind of story in our heads. You are living in a poem. So I've been thinking that all week. I am living in a poem. I'm taking that as an affirmation right now. I am living in a poem. Let me hear you. I am living in a poem. I think it enriches life just to think about it in that way. And she talks about it as kind of like you're in a sensibility that allows you a kind of mental, emotional, spiritual interaction with everything around you that's very, very good for your mental health. I think that it's similar to what the Buddhists would call mindfulness. And I think it's similar to what Jesus was suggesting when he said, the kingdom of heaven is spread across the earth and men see it not. We're not paying enough attention to the magnificence, the radiance of what's going on around us. So she was talking about poetry, but she's also talking about a way of moving through life with attention, with curiosity, with a readiness to be delighted, with what she calls a long, loving look. That's how we live in a poem. She mentioned that one of her, some workshops she did, there was a Japanese student there from Yokohama, and she sent her a message afterwards about what this phrase, you were living in a poem, meant to her. And she said in the Japanese language, they have a word for something very similar to that, what she's talking about. It's called yutori. I don't know if any of you ever heard that. It was a new word for me. I think it's Y-U-T-O-R-I, yutori. Let's say that together. It's a new word. Yutori. It feels good to say a new word in the mouth. But it means living with spaciousness. Living with spaciousness. According to the Japanese language dictionary, it's a state with sufficiency and ease. Like that. Living in that way. And they use that concept in a wide range of aspects of life, of just daily life, to do it with yutori, to practice yutori, no matter what you were doing, to bring that spirit into it. And that makes a lot of sense to me. And it is a way of thinking about how we move through our days that can bring a lot of grace into how we do it. And can be a way of relieving, kind of releasing that kind of stress, nose to grindstone stuff we get into, if you know what I'm talking about. Do you have days like that where you think, it's like, my nose is to the grindstone all day? Why? Who's the taskmaster? Is it me? Could be. We get in this space. I don't know what it is from our Puritan work ethic growing up, or just the culture. We have to be busy, we have to be doing. No, practice yutori. So what that looks like, There's lots and lots of ways it looks. One of the things she suggested is, suppose you're going to a meeting. If you're working and you're going to a meeting with some people, go early. Don't do it in a kind of rush just on time, but go early so that you can get there and relax and take in the space, check out the area, and get a sense of kind of into the rhythm of the place and relax before you go into your meeting. It could be in your own home while you're cooking, to give yourself time to work on a recipe, to put it together, to savor the smell of it as it's simmering on the stove, or to smell your spouse's cooking on the stove as it's simmering, whatever the case may be. Or if you're having people over for dinner, to take your time with ahead of time to kind of set the table and maybe put a candle or some flowers on it to kind of create the space, and think about the conversation and the companionship that is to come around that table. Living with spaciousness, giving it some space, some time, some reflection. Or when you're teaching, like Naomi, and like I taught for a number of years, to get to your classroom a little early and create that space and bring some vibes into it that are about the lively discussion and the mind opening and heart opening that's going to go on in that space that morning. Maybe put "You Are Living in a Poem" on the board like she does. Or when you're meditating or praying. One of my favorite little books on meditation, it's just called Meditation, a skinny little red book by Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, Buddhist teacher on meditation. He said, meditate with humor and expansiveness. It's the same idea. Not rush, not watching the clock, not getting stressed about, oh, my mind is wandering again. Just being humorous about it, letting things go, always just kind of coming back to breathing and sitting peacefully. Expansiveness, humor, that's living spaciously. Or when reading a poem, Nye talks about this. She says, knowing you can just hold it in your mind. You can hold it through the day, a word, a phrase, a thought, like you were living in a poem. She says something like that can be like an oar, like you propel yourself through a river. It can be an oar to guide you through your day. I think we do this often. Have you ever had like a song or a chant or phrase for something in your head all day long? I sometimes even have them during the night. Still got that song. If I wake up during the night, it's still there. Some phrase from a song, a little ditty. It could be a word. Like this week, it's been "You Were Living in a Poem." But it could be anything. It could be something from Scripture. I was thinking about some of those phrases. I used to know someone who liked to recite a phrase when she was feeling afraid and in need of protection. She'd use a little phrase from Psalm 91. He covers me with his feathers. He covers me with his feathers. I take refuge under his wings. A scripture like that can be a nice affirmation to have, to carry you through the day like an oar as you're rowing your way through the day. Or Nye says a powerful way to live with it, practice yutori, is to have a notebook, to jot things down in a notebook periodically through the day or whenever you think of it. She strongly recommends keeping a notebook handy in your car, in your bag. That if you have voices in your head and you let them speak to each other in a friendly fashion, she says, you will ask these questions that are rising in your mind and you will be surprised what comes to mind. The discoveries you make, the uncanny connections that will become visible to you if you just write 3 lines down in a notebook every day. Powerful way of sort of living more spaciously and opening up new ideas for reflection, deepening your experience of life and not rushing through it without really seeing or experiencing the blessings of the moment. And this is something we can do all the time. When you're planning your day, how are you going to get up in the morning? How are you going to go through your day? How are you going to have your meals? How are you going to talk to your kids? How are you going to interact with friends? All of those things we can do with greater yutori, with greater sufficiency and ease, with grace and imagination. I think that's what living spaciously is about. This poet I'm entranced with right now, Naomi, she talked about developing a habit of reading her son awake. A lot of parents read their children to sleep, right? And she did that for a number of years. And then when her son got to be about the age of 13, and she was still reading to him at night, he said, Mom, I can read to myself now. You really don't have to be doing this. And she said, I know. Most of the other parents probably stopped, reading to their kids at age 8 or 9. But they kind of enjoyed that time. But she said because of that, she didn't do any reading for a year or so. And then at one of her creative writing workshops, she met this older gentleman, a grandfather, who reminisced about how when he was a child, his grandfather would wake up the household out in the hallway outside the bedrooms in the morning, reciting poetry, and how meaningful that was for him. And she said her brain clicked, and she decided she would do that the rest of the time her son was at home. With her love of poetry, it was a great way for her to start the day. She was not sleepy, like parents and children often are at night, but wide awake. And her beloved son would be hearing this poem in the morning outside the bedroom door as he lulled and gradually woke up. That's a nice way to wake up in the morning, to hear a poem outside your bedroom door. We shall not cease from exploration. And the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. Wouldn't that be nice to hear outside your bedroom door in the morning? Or whatever the poem was. She did Japanese poems and Chinese poems and American poems. And she said it was a beautiful way to start the day for both of them. And she hoped her son would carry that on now because he has about a 3-month-old son, and will be carrying on that poetry tradition, she hopes. That's a beautiful way of bringing living more spaciously with just a decision you make about how you're going to start your day and how you're going to help your kids start their day, or whatever it might be. There's so many possibilities. She's mentioned that to a school principal, she said, and the school principal that she was visiting this high school said, I've always loved poetry, but I'm just a school principal. There's really no room for poetry in my life. And she said, well, do you have a loudspeaker in your office? Do you do announcements? And so he started doing a poem every morning over the loudspeaker. And she kind of forgot about it, but she went back and visited that school a couple years later to do a creative writing, a poetry class, and she said, I don't know what it is about this school, but these kids get poetry. And one of the students said, well, we hear them every day, we carry them in our heads all day. That's a beautiful gift to give someone. That's Yutori in action. That's living spaciously and graciously and imaginatively. And what a gift that is when we can give that to others. So I was sort of thinking about how do we practice this, and it's just really, it comes down to simple things like take time. Give ourselves more time. Well, we tend to keep ourselves too close to the clock, wouldn't you agree? Too on the clock, too close to the clock. I know I do, constantly. And we should take time, because when you have time, and you know you have time, you do things differently, right? You do things differently. If you're going through your day or you're driving somewhere and you're thinking, well, I've got time. Since I have time, I think I'll take the long route, along the river. I'll take the slower course along the river and see if there's ducks and geese out or whatever. Or since I have time, I'll stop and pick up a cafe mocha at that coffee shop that's down that way. Or since I have time, we live differently when we have a sense of time. That's something we can all do. Whatever the details of our day, we can give ourselves more time. And we can also take in more space, take in a space more openly, more open-hearted and open-minded. And I think this is something with full attention and to detail, really looking around and taking everything in. I think it's something we often do, particularly when we travel. Don't we experience spaces differently when we travel than when we're at home? I remember years ago, I think it was my first jaunt over to Yellow Springs. I drove over to Yellow Springs for an afternoon. How many of you have been to Yellow Springs? It's a treat to go anytime probably, but was not very familiar when I went over, and I had lunch somewhere, and I went into a hippie shop or two and picked out an old garment that reminded me of my youth, or walked in the little park over there. I wanted to look at the newspaper office, so I wound up wandering around down in an alley and to find my way to the Yellow Springs newspaper office. And I admired the art in the restaurant, and they said, oh, you should go to the artist co-op, or have you been to the artist co-op around the corner? And no, was. I went there. We do this when we travel, right? When we're taking in a place new. But why not in our daily life? Why not experience our own environment day by day that way, taking in that kind of space? I remember taking in New York City that way. You ever taken New York City on a golden Sunday afternoon, stroll in Central Park, stumble upon a street performer here and there, somebody doing magic or feeding pigeons or card tricks where you're guaranteed to lose some money, anything like that. These are the delights of life, day by day, that we cut ourselves off from far too often by being too nose to grindstone, too on task, too on clock. We need to instead, kind of rediscover the poetry of life, savor the images, the visions, the ideas that come to mind and connect up with the other ideas, the memories, the reflections, really see each other's, take time. You are living in a poem. You are living in a poem. And that means living with grace, with ease, knowing we have enough, we can take time, and we can just be here now and soak it up. So let's affirm that once more. I am living in a poem.
I am living in a poem.
Now let's take that into a closing prayer together. Just close our eyes and affirm that again within. Each of us, we are living in a poem. We are living in touch with the grace of God, with the power and presence that guides us through our days, that fills our minds with creative ideas, our imaginations afire with new ideas, with inventions, with creative spurts. How grateful we are to be in the flow of that energy and to let it guide us through our days, unhurried, full of grace and ease and sufficiency. We are in touch with the living God moment by moment. We have all that we need and all is well. And so it is. Amen. All right, we're going to have another song in a moment. You guys can come on up if you want to and get plugged in or whatever for that. We always take a moment to acknowledge how grateful we are for the support you've all been providing both here and online for the church continuing through the pandemic this past year, and now how grateful we are for the abundant support we've received. So if you brought a gift to share today, or you've shared something online via PayPal, or sent something in, we get checks in the mail too to the church. We're so grateful for all of that support, and we always like to affirm our offertory blessing, which is our recognition of the abundance of God flowing through our lives. So if you join me in that, those of you know it, divine love through me blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive, and I am grateful. All right. This. It's not on there. It's not on there. It's blank. That's what I was looking for.
We are having technical difficulties.
That's all right.
Everybody needs somebody they love best. Yes, yes, yes. You can say yes, yes, yes. Everybody's searching for a place to Yes,